and kind of how Aboriginal kids see themselves in the classroom. Pretty funny. Unlikely, like how we all got sold a lie when we were in school that if you worked hard, then you would have a great future. Not likely that Aboriginal kids will believe this myth. Sounds like they've all been reading Noam Chomsky to me. So you've got to make learning be relevant and purposeful for the present, not for the future. It's kind of like this chapter's kind of full of generalisations and stereotypes, but you know, all credit to you, Dr. Neil. We've got to think in labels. So there's a bit of a contention over the whole thing about learning styles and whether there are specific learning styles that are Aboriginal learning styles. This quote's sort of a contradiction itself. Paul Hughes, there is no Aboriginal way of learning, but he does talk about recurrent Aboriginal learning strengths. This is kind of the whole thing about how we've got to use labels, even though the labels themselves will never be complex enough to describe a situation. But anyway, some generalisations. One from Harris. Imitation. Aboriginal children will likely naturally learn through imitation, not necessarily in a highly conscious way. Kind of reminds me of the way little kids learn naturally, and the way I most enjoyed learning French when I was overseas, when I wasn't trying too hard, just kind of mindlessly repeating sounds I heard, and how it was a pretty good process actually, learning. Seemed to get the neural pathways myelinating nicely. Trial and error rather than words or instructions. So again, it's like that slightly not so stressful, slightly less conscious way. Just keep going, not stressing about it, just letting it happen. Number 3, learning because you need to know something rather than for the sake of learning itself. So, like, learning to shear a sheep because the sheep needs to be sheared, not because you want to learn something. And kind of funny when, the whole trying to create a love of learning vibe, sort of opposite of that. And number 4, it's kind of the same thing, context-specific learning, not theory learning, so learning for the sake of being able to do something now, not thinking like this might help me in my future. 3 and 4 seem quite similar. Okay, so inquiry-based learning, problem solving, not necessarily going to go down easily with Indigenous students when it's in relation to content. Yes, they are doing this type of thing all the time in relation to relationships. But those problems are more closely associated with who is saying what to whom and how it is being said, rather than with the content and skills that are being taught. So the focus on connection rather than content coming through again. And this was kind of interesting, like the teacher might think you're doing a good job. I think I encountered a bit of this last year, trying to set kids up learning independently, but them just kind of feeling sad, like that you just left them and you weren't helping them, and rather than them relishing in their own independence, them just feeling like you abandoned them. The whole critiquing thing, just remember that at home, knowledge might not be something to be challenged or critiqued, but rather repeated and passed on. So a different approach to knowledge there. Active learning, especially in reading, getting them to read for meaning, not just reading the words passively. I'm not quite sure how though, if we're not asking too many direct questions. I guess if there's a task, they have to read something and then complete the task. Not quite sure how to do that in this context. In the keep teaching to keep a happy section, that was really interesting. The whole thing, like when you constantly when the teacher's saying like, yes, well done, good boy, good girl, even that positive stuff can promote the authority and the kind of you're doing things to get me happy. This has really come up with my kids, my two little kitties. I find it really absurd when they say thank you and someone says to them, good girl, rather than you're welcome. And it seems like the manners have just become this, like you just say your manners to keep the adults happy rather than it being like an expression of mutual respect. So, yeah, still chewing over this one because I guess I've, like dishing out the praise in the classroom is kind of been built for me, and somehow changing that discourse so it's more about mutual respect. Yeah, keep chewing through that one. Okay, conflict avoidance. This one was really funny. Little side note, most Aboriginal kids will try to avoid conflict with the teacher, but this doesn't necessarily mean they will do as they're told. Gratuitous concurrence. So you ask them to do something and they say yes, and then they don't do it. And you're like, what? What just happened there? But for them, the yes, it's more of like, I agree with, it's not like, yes, I'm going to do it. It's like, if I say yes, then you'll think I'm polite and obliging, and then you and I will stay on good terms and things will work out well between us. I love it. On the parenting thing, how it's saying Aboriginal parents issue less than half the number of controlling acts than non-Aboriginal parents. Yeah, I love that too. Group work, where risk and glory can be shared, and let them move around. Don't do the sit still thing. Paying attention, eye contact. Non-Aboriginal people might think it's rude to not look at the person that you're speaking to. And I'm finding this as well with my kids. If they do something wrong and they have to say sorry, they really resist making eye contact. And I'm trying to teach them, make eye contact when you say sorry because it's more authentic. They're just really struggling with that, and I'm a bit fascinated by that. I should be forcing them into that really confrontational, confronting situation where they have to make eye contact as they say sorry. I don't know. And this was interesting as well, how non-Aboriginal people like to hear a lot of yes, 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 I know what you're saying, and all this, feedback and this kind of connection that the person is paying attention, compared to the Aboriginal person that doesn't need all that. Attendance arriving late and absenteeism. It's going to happen. We don't want it to happen because we want the kids to learn, but confronting them with it and making it a big deal, it's not necessarily going to help things, might just make things worse. The use of questions. In a non-Aboriginal social situation, parents and teachers will nail their kids with questions all day long, see what they know. This is not so common in Aboriginal homes, so direct question, they just might not answer your direct questions, so maybe you find other ways of connection and assessment. A sort of an extension of that is that the how or why type questions might be particularly difficult for Aboriginal students, but especially as they get older, they are going to need to understand and be able to use those modes of thinking if they're going to do well at school. So we are going to have to introduce that into their discourse in a way where they can start to feel more comfortable. Dr. Neil doesn't say anything about age, but I'm guessing this is more upper primary, high school sort of stuff. Okay, shame. Shame can dominate how many Aboriginal children think, talk and behave in the classroom. Pushing them into, and this is, I just saw my little girl in this chapter, who just wants to watch and watch and watch and watch and watch before she has a go. She's not Aboriginal, but swimming lessons were a disaster for her because she needed like a good 10 minutes to watch an activity before she'd jump in and do it, and by then the teacher had moved on to something else. So I can understand this whole, like, they just want to watch and sort of get it right before they dive in and have a go. And also kind of the opposite thing, they don't necessarily want to be the tall poppy and they don't want to jump up and show everyone how well they can do it for the sake of the pride of everyone else in the room. So the saving face and then maintaining the coherent, stable identity can just slow things down so we don't have these super keen, overly enthusiastic kids who are just diving, desperate to jump in and get cracking. Things might be a bit more chilled out. The identity thing, non-Aboriginal students will likely look to their teacher for their mirror, for their feedback, wanting to do things well and be told they're doing things well. But Aboriginal students will likely look to their peers, parents and relations for support and feedback. So the driving force in the classroom might not be you, teacher. Let's not use that as a cop-out though. Okay, summary. Aboriginals will not necessarily be motivated by thoughts of a better future. Let Aboriginal students try new skills privately or in groups rather than in public. Don't rush them. Students need to be able to see themselves in what they learn. No point learning that random stuff that's not connected to them. Remember that knowledge at home is not something to be challenged. Problem-solving and inquiry-based learning, especially independent ones, are generally not successful strategies with Aboriginal children. Still then I'm like, but even though they're not successful strategies for learning whatever content you've got then, surely they need to learn how to use those strategies for success in school and, dare I say it, life. I don't know, is that my prejudice coming through there? I just kind of feel like even though they're not comfortable with it, that they still need to learn it at some point. I think we've already said it. Let them work in groups. Remember, they will not necessarily look at you while they are listening. Don't ask them why they were absent from class. Get the reason from their peers. Many Aboriginal students are more motivated to maintain a coherent identity than they are by a teacher who has high expectations. The end.